if you're not guys, if you guys are not using those lab, right? So make sure they should be in the stop status, right? That's the best.
Okay, okay.
Because you guys lab are going to expire on 14th of July, right? So before that, complete all
Yeah.
these sessions, complete your exam preparations and all those things. It's like 45
Oh,
days like days.
exam preparation. July. Okay, it's too
July,
far.
July 14th.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay, so it's starting for me.
Hmm?
The lab is starting.
Yeah. Okay, so the architecture what we have, especially that you are asking about that, right, Madhu? Okay.
Yeah.
So in the container management tool, or we can say orchestration tool, what we have there, we have two types of machine we required to manage and maintain our OpenShift infrastructure with the help of these, I mean container infrastructure with the help of OpenShift command or with the help of Kubernetes command, right? What we need, that we need a master node kind of thing, and then we need a worker
Worker
node,
node.
right? So the master node, or we can say that type of machine that store all those membership about the worker node, right? And that handle your worker node process, the resources, and then also auto schedule that which the pod that are going to deploy on the which worker node, right? With the help of labeling, with the help of different selectors, lot of things we have that in the environment, right? So in this lab what we have that, if you notice now, right, or what we require, especially when we talking about to configurations of this particular environment or lab, right? So we need at least worker node, we can say we have like 1 2 or 3, depend on your environment and resources that might be traffic, I mean your client and all those things, right? So we need a number of worker node, and then we need a master node, right? Depend on their traffic and all those things, you guys can configure a master node, right? And these master node, we can say, or these worker node is a member of this particular
Yeah.
master, right? We can
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Sorry to interrupt. I just have one question. Like in Kubernetes, we have master node, I agree, but it has component like etcd, controller,
The same
manager,
thing we have
scheduler.
over here, we can say
Same.
operator.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. If you notice on this first theory part, right? So here you can check all those operators and all those things. You can check everything, clusters operator and all those things. These are configured over your master node, all those things. If you notice now, we have etcd, right? We have a DNS server and all those things. We have ingress rules and the unit, everything with this configured over here.
So in OpenShift also, master node would be having Cube API server, controller,
Everything,
manager,
yeah. So Cube,
scheduler. Okay.
yeah, everything, because again, your Kubernetes are built on your sorry, your OpenShift built on your Kubernetes,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So everything, whatever over the Kubernetes, everything's are available inside your OpenShift, and there is a lot of another features that have a Kubernetes that have a OpenShift available. We can something SCCs, we have some SLX concept, or we can say we have a nice console and all those things compared to the
So that
Kubernetes.
ACC Kubernetes is not having, right?
The SLNX policy, yeah, SLNX is not available inside this Kubernetes actually, because it's like a
No, no,
OS based
ACC.
SCCs, yeah, security
Yeah.
context constraints. That's about the SLNX.
Okay.
This works on that
Oh,
SCCs,
okay.
right? So this is
Okay.
not available inside your Kubernetes, because it's like a
Kubernetes.
OS based
Okay.
on all those things, right? So they integrate OS plus applications, so they got SCCs and all those things like that. Okay,
Okay.
the
Got it.
environment
Yeah.
remains same. We have a like worker node, we have a master node, right? From the master node we are running any command, like something if you notice on the Kubernetes what we command, we have the like kubectl run, right, hyphen name and all those things. We can
Yeah.
configure, we can create that particular pod, right? Here
Yeah.
in the OpenShift, what we have that command like OC new app, right? Right? In this Kubernetes, if you're talking about the deployment and all those things, because this command only create a pod for you, the kubectl run command, right? It's not going to create a other component like deployment, the secret, the replica set, services and all those things. You need to create it manually and all those things, right? Here in the in the OpenShift, what we have that when talking about the OC new app command, right? So this command will generate a multiple component, like again we'll discuss that deployment, right? Then pod, services, replica set, right? So
Yeah,
they will
like we
automatically
saw.
so like we'll get everything. So right, so we can say it's about the more flexible and we can say about when talking about the container orchestration set, these tools or OpenShift are more feature than compared to the Kubernetes. It will create a multiple services for you. The within a command you can change inside that. If something goes wrong inside this file, it automatically apply. It is not going to apply those changes. Why? Because the syntaxes might be incorrect, right? So that's also a point. These things are also available in the Kubernetes as well, but depend on the different feature what manifest file you guys are using those things. Inside those you can manage and maintain those, right?
Okay.
So environment remains same, right? We have like worker and master node, right? In here in our lab, if we're talking about that, we have a command OC get node, or in the Kubernetes what command we have that kubectl get node, right? So if you notice now what command we have that to getting that. So here we have a machine that name is master01, and now this machine itself has a master and also as a worker, right? In the exam or in the real world, we have different machines. They clearly mention this is my master node and these are my worker node, right? Even though see this about lab 4.12, right? If you're talking about the older lab, right? So we have three machines. If you need, then I'll show you that. Just give me a moment. Yeah. So in earlier older version, we can say 4.10 and all those things. We have three machines: master 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? And inside that again we have like three master and also three worker node. So depend on that you can manage, you can schedule, or you have an option that you also set a tents and all those things to not deploy any pods, right? If you notice now in this 4.10 version, because we are using something different version. Okay, it's not logged in yet. Just give me a second. USR local HC OCP config. Okay, just a second, right? Here my username is kubeadmin. Okay, and then password what we have, that is my password. Okay, in the exam and everywhere they clearly mention that username and password, right? Sorry, this is a
so in exam we would need to cat this file, or we would get the
no,
username?
they clearly mention those username password in the questions paper, so no need to cat this file. This file is not available in the exams. Okay, yeah. Server is not running it properly. Just a second. SSH utility. Just a second, right? I'm checking my lab availabilities. It's not properly configured.
Satendra,
this is.
I just wanted to understand like each component, like how it communicates, in the architecture, like ETCD, what it does.
So these things are not in this content, right? Which right? But again, I'll let you know. Not a problem, right? Because these things are they mentioned that we're talking about the installations and configurations of OpenShift, right? So that's like a different course content. But again, if you guys need, then I'll definitely let you know. Not a problem, right? The content, the operator, and all those things, because we are talking about the administrator part, right? In the admin, they are simply talking about we have a we have a architecture, or we can say we have a environment already and all those things, right? How we can manage, maintain, and secure our applications. That's the point, right? But
Okay.
again, if you need, then definitely I'll let you. Not a problem, right?
Yeah, if you can paste the link also, that's also fine.
Yeah, definitely I'll
Because
let you
yeah.
know if you guys need then. Right? Because again, these are a content they Red Hat define with the different parameters. Like we'll talk about the older, or we can say about the containers. What is container? All those things. They are simply
Mhm.
talking about the 180 or 188 courses. For the administrator, they are talking about that 280 for the
Okay.
deployment. All those things we have a 288 for the advanced and administrator part. They are talking about a 380, right? So these are
Oh,
different
okay.
courses they design for the same, right? So again, if I just show you the theory part, then we don't have options to perform the lab, because these are like custom lab. Then we cannot perform those lab inside
Yeah, I agree.
this point. So that's a problem actually. Okay, my username is cubeadmin. Okay, so if you notice now, that is my the different machines, right? So we
Mhm.
have like three machines, right? Master 0, 2, and 3, right?
Yeah,
And these three are my master and also as a worker node, right?
worker
So
node. Yep.
again, yes, if you checking the I mean 4.2 versions, we are using only one master and also as a treat like a worker, and we are running a Kubernetes version 1.25. Here we are running Kubernetes 1.23,
2, 3.
right? So
Yeah.
process remains same. In the exam they clearly mentioned that no need to create these setup and all those things, right? In the exam we have a different master node and we have a different worker node, right? Depend
Okay.
on their availabilities and all those things, depend on their availabilities and all those things, we created these machines, because these machines are running over the cloud, right? So depend on the hardware resources and all those things, they customize, or we can say they reduce those lab resources, right? But again,
Yep.
process remains same. Whatever we are using over the we can say the Kubernetes, all everything remains same, right? How we can connect those things, what the connections and all those things, definitely I'll let you know. Not a problem, right?
Yep.
So again, what we have in environment, what exactly environment we have, that we have like worker node and then we have master node, right? With the help of single master node, we can connect multiple worker node. If you think that if any machines goes down or have some having some problem and all those things, then you can similarly, what you can say, drain it, right? And then you can create a new master and create a new worker node and attach to your master, or we can say create
Okay.
a member of these machines. So process remains same, right? Everything what we have in the Kubernetes, because it's like upstream version of your Kubernetes, right?
Okay.
Clear with that? Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the process. Again, if you're checking the nodes environment, what we have that nodes, and then we have a pods and all those things. Wanted to verify those nodes information, then we have a mechanism. You can describe these node. Either we have a graphically consoles and all those options you can use in that way, right? If you notice on that, we have a OC who am I? Sorry, show console options to checking the URL. What URL we have that, right? So you can also manage or maintain your OpenShift with the help of console. I mean, we can say with the help of GUI.
Yeah.
Correct. So you can log in inside that, and then you can describe or explore. If you remember, then we already discovered those things. Either you can describe like OC describe whatever you want to describe, those things you can describe with the help of this particular node, right? So
Yep.
process remains same. Like we can say we have a different event. I mean, they are talking about events, right? And they are calling from the kubelet component services, right? That is your message. That is my hardware resource of your compute, or we can say my node, Okay, and these are a component, or we can say these are a different services that are managing or that maintaining over this particular nodes, right?
Okay.
And because these like a worker master as well, so they can configure every component inside the same machines, but in the real world we have a different component for the master and for the worker, right? So different on the different namespace and all those things, we have a different services running inside this particular machines, right? And which version they are using there, they are using a Kubernetes 1.25, the OS, the architecture, the runtime, cryo, and all those things, everything they are clearly mentioned there, right? So for the very first point, what we can say, like in this environment, not talking about the real world in the exams, right? In this environment, we have only one machines, right? And over the same machines, what we have that we have a master node and also as a worker node, right? If we are
Okay.
going to deploy any application, that application going to deploy on the same machines. Clear? Yeah. Right, and then we'll discuss that the installations part, if you guys need how to configure those on your local machines, right? And then some part of like the communications component, what are the data etcds and all those things, right? The API server, the kubelet API scheduler and all those things, we'll discuss that. If you guys need that, definitely we'll discuss that. Yeah, clear? So shall we move with the next one, right? That what we left, guys.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the last time already we discussed how we can create our own authentications, right, with the help of OAuth, right, and inside that we are using ST pass WD mechanism, right. With the help of these mechanism, what we can create, we just create those user authentication, like we have different users, and how we can create those things, right. Now the next what we have, that we have a role based access control, RBAC, right? So again, what we can see, that is also available in your Kubernetes, so do not confuse about that. The process remains same, depend on the different environment what you can use that. Now, so what rollback actually? So earlier in this particular chapter, like the previous chapter, we discussed like how we can create a user in your clusters, right? And also we'll discuss that whenever we create our users, by default they have a permissions to create their project in their account, right? They can create self, right? Why? Because they are a part of your self provisioner roles, correct, right? Once you remove those things, then that user is not that user is not allowed to create their project. Clear? Yeah. Now after that, when we're talking about like we have some users, and if we wanted to specify or assign some extra permissions or extra privileges, right? So we have like two types of role, we can say. We have like admin role, and then we have a we can say we have a local roles, and then we have a clusters role, right? So depend on their permissions, depend on their specializations and we can say areas and all those things, we can define them permissions, right? So clusters role, local role, and all those things, right? Now, so when we're talking about the permissions and all those things, we have a command like ocadm policies, then add cluster role to user, and whatever the options we have that we can specify. The same way we can perform here as well. We have like these are a different options. With those options we can specify those different permissions too as well, right? Now, so what we have inside this particular clusters role, right, when we're talking about that, so similarly we can say select mechanism inside your inside your containers environment, we can see in the Kubernetes as well, or we can see in the Openshift as well, right? How we can manage our resources, right? Like we can perform that permissions to my users or group for the certain number of tasks or actions, right? What they can do, what they can not do, right? So already we discussed, we have like two types of role inside this. We have a clusters and we have a local roles, right? Then what options we have, that we have a roles, and then we have binding and all those things, right? So these are options, and already we discussed those things, right? Now these are a command as well, like OCADM policies, right? Wanted to add a role, what command we have, that add, and similarly for removing you can use the remove command, right? Similarly want to specify for the group, then you can mention the OCDM policies, add role to group, and for removing you can use that from group, right? By default in this course again we have only a default role, we can assign those role that's that role, right? But again, if you want to create your own rules and all own roles and all those things, we'll have options. I'll discuss for the same, right? But again, for this courses, what we have there, we have some default role. We can say admin and all those things. We can specify or we can assign those roles to users or group, and other things are remain same. Clear? And
Okay.
these are some default roles, right? Earlier we discussed like admin, basic, cluster, status, and all those things. Similarly, we have a self provisioner, so we can say user with this role can create a project. It's a cluster role, not a project role, right? So by default, these are going to happening, right? Whatever we can say, when we create our users, okay. These users, that user are a part of by default which role? We can say self provisioner, and they have a virtual group that we can system or authentications. So that's like default that are happening inside this in this particular OpenShift environment. But again, if you remove all those things, it's not going to perform, right? And these are same
Yeah.
types of user. You guys know the regular user, system user, and service account users, right? SA and all those things, we'll discuss that. We have a different permission. If you remember that, we just created a Nginx pod and all those things, but that Nginx pod needs some extra permissions. I mean that pod need your host machine's mount point, right? So that applications don't have a much permission. So for that we applying some SLNX service account, and then for that we apply some SCC to perform some certain action or some certain task. Clear?
Yeah.
Right?
So what
Yeah.
this ACC exactly
I
does?
will discuss after this. We have options. I'll
Yeah. Okay.
discuss that. Yeah,
Sure.
just give me a 5 minute or
Okay.
more than,
Yeah.
right? So these lab already we done that. If you guys need, then I'll let you know. Want to perform this lab? Already we discussed those things. If you remember, then what we can do, we can similar checking my
Um,
self provision role. We'll already discuss that, right? And after that, what we are doing that we are simply remove those roles, right?
yeah, we did this
We
last
did
time
it,
also.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a point actually. Right, so just perform those things, and depend on that you can perform and everything, right? So that's like about the
Yeah.
rollback success control. In the exam, these questions are by default there. Okay, so that's about chapter number second, right? In the chapter number fourth, what we are going to discuss about that, right? We have options. Okay, just a second. We have a different chapters and all those things. Just give me a second. SCCs, where we have that, because okay, so they changed the actually chapter number. In earlier version we have, if that is inside the chapter number fourth, right? But now
Okay.
it's chapter number 6. Because these not a dependencies, then we can switch, not a problem. Just give me a second. Okay, so no worry. Let us jumping on chapter number 6. Okay, and then after that we'll discuss about chapter number 3, because what I think with like past 4 years, right? This is like dependencies topic, so might be they change that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about this. We already discussed about the RBAC, right? Already we discussed, and then I'm jumping on chapter number 6. Then we'll discuss about chapter number 3 and so on. Right now,
Okay.
so in the chapter number 6, what we have that how we can secure our applications. When we're talking about the application securities and all those things, right? So similarly, in the same single system, how we can as a OpenShift administrator, or we can say as a orchestration utility administrator, all those things, how we can secure our application with the help of different mechanisms, right? So inside that already we know in the Kubernetes we have some secret features, right? We have some secret features, and then also in this particular OpenShift we have some SSS features, right? So the similarly part what we have that we're talking about those SCCs and all those things. Again, the first we are going to talk about the SCC, then we have option for the security, because you guys know the security feature, so that's like a basic thing, right? Now, so in the SCC is what we have exactly, right? That we can security context constraints, right? So when we're talking about the, because these like are based on your SLNX policies in the Red Hat based operating system, right? So that we can say
Okay.
security, right? Enhanced Linux, right? So these SLNX works on two component, or we can say two main technique. We can say the context and then the booleans, right? If you remember, though, in the basic Linux part and all those things, we have these I mean in RSCSA, the basic, the first chapter, or we can say the first course of the Linux, actually we talked about this SLNX and all those things, right? So these
Yeah.
SLNX works on two features, especially the context and then the booleans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So context is nothing simple. When talking about the non-technical word, we can say it's like a token, right? Let's suppose I wanted to come over your system and all those things, right? So what I need, that I need some kind of token to identify, like yeah, that is my packet, and that packet should be accessed over that machines, whatever the machines we have, that, right? So in between, or we can say as a mediator, we have a SLNX, right, that generate a token for you, right? So every file, folder and service have a unique token, right? So if that token are going to match that, then obvious you can access your applications, or you can access your services, right? So context is nothing simple, we can say it's like a token, right? So every service have a unique token and all those things, you can access those applications very easily. Similarly, what booleans we have that, so booleans means we can say just like a permissions, right? Let's suppose with the help of context we can provide, or we can associate that users to that exact users, or we can say customer, right? After access those application, what that customer perform in the backend, or what they can perform in their system and all those things, that is maintained by your booleans, right? So again, every service have a single or unique boolean context, but they have a number of, or we can, they have a multiple booleans, right? If you wanted to verify those things, wanted to check, then what option we can verify, or what we can check that. Let's suppose we have a command, especially you can use this particular get se bool command in the OS page. There's a command, right? -a to check the all boolean inside the system. Similarly, wanted to verify the service, let's suppose HTTP services, then we have these booleans, right? Depend on their permission, all those things we can specify. Let's suppose you have a web server on those machines and wanted to specify that anyone can write or comment. Let's suppose you have some blogs, right, in the web pages and all
Mm-hmm.
those things. So if you wanted to write some comment and all those things, right, you need to log in with your account. You cannot directly write or comment some messages. Why? Because the same in the SNS context and all those things, we have a HTTP anonymous write is by default off, right? If you wanted to allow that, no, anyone can write without providing their credential, or we can say provide without their users and all those things, we need to specify, we need to put as a I mean, we need to enable those services, right? So
Mm-hmm.
process and all those remain are same. We have like lot of booleans we have that wanted to allow some script, like you have some automated script and then you wanted to run with the help of HTTP and all those things. Make sure if you have a running SLNX policies, then make sure this boolean should be enable. Similarly, wanted to specify some spam message and all those things, you need to enable these services. Wanted to connect your HTTP with the help of FTP, then you need to enable these services. A lot of feature we have that. According this feature, you guys can connect those this, right? Similarly, you have a JBix application for monitoring and all those things, right? Wanted to connect your JBix with this particular HTTP services, then you need to enable these services. If that is in the off status, then you cannot attach your HTTP service with your JPEGs applications, correct? So that we
Okay.
can say about the particular, this particular booleans. Context, what we can say, or we can say similarly. So let's suppose if you have applications and all those things, right? So every applications have some context. Let's suppose, just give me a second, let me install these applications, right? Right, so if you notice now, we have a default document root if you notice now, right? So what command we have that, ls for the listing, l for the ls command for list, and then l, d stand for directory, z for the SLNX context, for which folder, the default documentation root. If you notice now, what context we have that, That is my context, right? So what that applications required actually, or what they want, let's suppose, right? Let's suppose you have a web applications. What I'm just giving simple example of
Mhm.
SLNX. Okay, then we'll discuss what the CC. So let's suppose we have configured a web server, right? And that web server have a default documentation, default context. What we have that is the HTTP sys contain t. That is by default provided by your SLNX policies, right? If your SLNX is an enable mode, we can say there are three modes, right? Which mode we have that?
Enforced,
Enforcing.
disabled, permissive.
Correct, right? So we have enforcing, then we have a permissive, and
Permissive.
then we have a disabled,
Disabled.
right? So if that is in the enforcing mode, then that are going to check everything, right? So let's suppose you have a web server and all those things, and then we have a default documentation. We can say we have a like where www html, right? So if any, so that's a default that's a default context of this particular context, right? It means what? It means if something or some pages are available inside this particular folder, then that page is automatically accessible. Why? Because this page has a same context, right? But if you change something like that, then you cannot access those things, right? I'll give you example. Let's suppose we have a page something abc dot no, I'm just giving the same index.html, right? Index.html, and here we mention this is my test page for SLNX, right? Save and quit. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to simple move inside that. So moving means it will change those documentation, change those context. If you notice now, so what context we have then inside my where www, we have this file, right? If you want to check this file context, that have a different context, that we have a admin home t, correct?
Yeah.
It means what? It means if you're trying to access those page, right? Now we can say we have a different token, and that service have a different token. What that service need, that if you wanted to access with my application all those things, make sure you have two contexts, but we have a different one, right? It means what? It means if you wanted to access those application with your IPs or name, let's suppose what IP we have, that something 09 something, right? 2509. Okay, it means what? It means wanted to access those application, we have error message, or we can say we have a default head page. It means what? That page is not accessible, and then we are also getting some alert from the SLNX, if you notice now, right? And even though you can also verify in this particular log file, where log, httpd, error log, and all those things. Here we are getting this. Guys, just a second, please. Just a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, clear with that? Okay. So what log we are getting, that we have index.html and all those things. So we have a denied because of the serve permission for the missing component. Correct? So it means what? It means we can say, I'm audible, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it means what we can say, we have this page and we wanted to access this page with the help of web server. So in between we have services, we can say we have SLNX, right? So this service are verify everything. We can say this service are going to access that going to maintain that. If you wanted to access those application with the help of web server, but they have a different context. So in that purpose and all those things, you do have a different token and all those things. So that's why we are not going to access those, or we are not going to allow those services, right?
Yeah.
If you wanted to allow those services, then we have options. What option we have? That either set or correct the context, either
disable this
Disable,
Linux.
or we can say stop this particular checker, we can say that are going to check those services, right? So if you want to access those application it means that's incorrect format and all those things, then what, then just make it permissive, right? If you notice now what options we have, that now it's in permissive mode. If you want to access this service now, then you can access, even though we have incorrect SLX, then again, right? But again we are using a permission mode, we are getting the warning message as well, but we can access those applications, right? And again, once your once your SLS are in the enabled mode, or we can say in the enforcing mode, then again all the policy that having the incorrect context and all those things, then again that are not going to access, correct?
Yep.
Right? So if I want to access your applications with the correct context, and even though in the running assurance policies, then make sure your applications file should be in the correct context. So in that case you need to set that, like what context we need, that we need a HTTP something sys. No need to remember those things, these are mentioned over the Google and all those things, you can easily access those things, right? And then file name, hit enter, check those context. So here we have application accessible, right? Now this time
Yeah.
wanted to access those pages, even though we have a correct context, we have a SMS policy running, then you can access your pages, right? So process remains same. If you wanted to access your application, all those things, or wanted to send some packet from source to destination, then in the between we have a policy that we can SLNX, right? It will store all the record. Wanted to access those application, right? You can send and send like that, right? And for the booleans, again we have a different policies. With the help of different policies, you guys can enable or disable, or we can say on or off your applications. Clear?
Yep.
Now, so on based on the same policies and all those things, we have SCCs, right? So what the use of SCC and all those things, again in the OpenShift architecture, or we can say in the container based platform, whenever we are trying to create a pod, right? So again in the environment what we have, that we have a worker node, and from the environment we have that, let's suppose we have worker node, right? And whenever you're trying to create a pods, right, if that pod needs some extra privileges or permissions that might be required from your base machine, or we can say the hosts, right? So that we have some policy, we can say SCCs, right? In that case we need to give some extra permissions or privileges to the pod, because again we cannot directly assign the to the pod permissions to, yes you can access those permissions, no it's not possible, right? With the help of service account, with the help of SCCs, that we are going to specify pod that have some extra permissions to use some extra privileges, some extra permissions from your host machines, right? So that's
So
point, yeah.
so SSC is always bound with the service
Service
account, not
account.
to the pod. Okay.
Service account, right. So yeah, so in this basically if we're talking about the theory part, if you notice now, right, in the RHOCP what we have, that SCC, a security mechanism that limit the access from the running pod in the OpenShift, right, to the host environment, right? With the help of SSC we can control this following resources, what, running privileged containers, require extra capabilities for your container, using host directory as a volume, right? Again if that container needs some mount point from your host machines, right, in that case we need to specify the SSCs, right? Changing the context of your container, there we can also do the same thing, and then all those things we have options, right? So these
Yep.
things we can perform with the help of SCC, with the help of your service account, right? So in this course again we are not talking about those, I mean they are not talking about those SCC creation, but we have some default SCCs, right? We can use this, we can use this OC get SCC, so like we have some default SCC and all those things, right? We have something NUID, host access, host mount point and all those things, right? So these are some default SCC, you can check that, right? Clear? Wanted to specify or describe something, like if not, if we are not sure what the use of this particular NUID SCCs, right? So you can describe those things, like OC describe SCC and then your SCC name. If you notice now what they mentioned there, right? What they mentioned, so we have these machines. Access means what we can say, if you notice now,
Cluster admin.
It means what? It means if any service account have any UID, and then we can specify those service account to the pod. It means that pod have all the permissions, all privileges. They can use anything in the host machines, or they can perform these certain tasks, whatever they mention that.
Okay.
Right? So that's
And
like if
that, mhm. No, that any UID,
it's like
okay, that
SEC
name.
name. It's a name
Okay, that
actually.
is
It's a
name.
name. It's a
Okay.
name, right? Even though if you're not so sure about that, I'll let you know. If you're not so sure about that, like we have a pod and what SEC that pod required, right? So even though you can ask itself to the pod like what SEC you need that, even though the command will show that yeah I need this kind of SEC to perform or to solve this error and all those things. Even though.
How we can get that by describing that pod or
No,
how?
we have options to reviewing those things. I'll let you know. Not a problem. We'll
Okay,
discuss
okay, okay.
everything, right?
Yeah,
So even though
sure.
I'll just letting you like we have these options. With the help of these options, we can check that if you're not sure about that, like we have this error, and I know these that have some SCC error, right? So how we
Mhm.
can solve or what SCC we can assign to solve this particular pod error, right? So you can ask to your command with the help of OpenShift reviews command and all those things, and even though that command itself let you know like we need this kind of SCC to solve this particular error, right? So don't
Yeah.
worry about that. Yeah. So SCC. So we can say again in this particular um, course content we have options. We can use those SCCs to solve those issues, but again we don't have options to creating those SCCs, right?
Okay.
Right, so let's suppose let me check some pods are running on all those
Now,
things.
why I was asking because
Mm-hmm.
yesterday I got one of the issue from my customer. He
Mm-hmm.
was using OpenShift 4.11.25
Mm-hmm.
and he was deploying our application. So it
Mm-hmm.
was failing for the Postgres Helm chart and the
Uh-huh.
pod
Uh-huh.
error. It was showing the one which I pasted in the chart.
Yeah, that
So
one.
I had created one service account, role and
Mm-hmm.
role binding, and
Mm-hmm.
associated those with that service account. Then I created SCC
Hmm.
with allow non-root or
Yeah,
run
yeah, I
as
got
any
it
user
actually.
and bounded
Mm-hmm.
that to that service account. But still, this error was persist. So that's why I
So
wanted to
you can,
understand.
yeah, so you can use this command. I'll just let you, like, let's suppose this pod is running, right? But I'm not
Mhm.
sure about this because mostly this that error we are getting for that not running services. But again, what command we have that we have a command like oc get pod to reviewing those things. If that could be arrested, then you can use this particular pod and in the YAML format, and inside that you can use oc adm. Okay, yeah, pod, then you can use oc adm policies, right? SCC.
There was no SSC created for that, so that's why we
Yeah,
created new SSC.
no, so SCC is by default there. We are simply checking those things, right?
Okay. Any UID? No,
It
it
may,
was not there because it was from the different namespace which we were creating that project.
no, you're talking about your environment or my? I didn't get actually.
No, no. In
Hmm.
my environment, there was no default SSC associated with the pods which being created from our side.
No, no, it's not associated with the same thing. Even though we have some error actually, right, Hannah? Even
Mm-hmm.
though we have some error and all. Okay, by default, what we have that, okay, when when we create those pod and all those things, right? By
Mm-hmm.
default, they have a restricted SCC. That's a default happen. That's a default happening. I mean, that's a default environment in the OpenShift,
Okay.
right? That's also a point actually. We'll discuss that. But again, if you wanted to verify, then the first thing you can execute in your environment, OC get SCCs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in that particular we have a lot of SCCs, right? And by default whenever we're creating a pod, that pod have a default SCCs that have a restricted,
Okay.
right? This pod is running, but let me show that, yeah, how we can check that. OC describe pod and then pod name and inside that pipe grep SCC, right? So here we have a default NUID, right? But when talking about those environment, we have a restricted SCC. That's a default one. Okay,
Okay.
just a second. Let me launch a hello and images. I'm going to use Nginx. Let's suppose.
So you are saying that we created that namespace, and in that, if you are going to deploy this OC new app and the app, it will pick the default ACC. You are saying like that?
No, 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 no. SCC is not a project based.
Okay, so it is cluster wide.
Yes, SCC is not a project which is like a storage and all those things, right? We are assigning those to the different pods and all those things,
Okay,
right?
okay.
I'll show you that. Let's suppose we have this pod, but that pod having error, right? So why I'm getting this error, right? So in that case, if you check the logs of this pod, so what they need that, if you notice now,
Yeah, permission.
it means what? This pod required your host mount point permission. They're trying to create some filter, but they don't have a permissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by default, what we have that if you describe these pod and then the pod name and then grep and then SCCs, so by default they have a which SCC, they have a restricted. That's a
Restricted.
default that we're going to do that, right? So if you wanted to specify those things, like we have some error, error means we have some permission, all those things, what SCC we assign to fix these errors. So we are not sure about, like we have a lot of SCCs, so you can also ask with the same thing, right? You can specify
Okay.
OC get pod and then the yeah, pod name, okay, and then you can use OC ADM policies, right? And then SCC review, okay, like that. If you notice now, uh, okay, JSON, I need to mention those because it will extract me those
Hyphen O
files.
YML. Yeah.
Yes, 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 correct. Okay, so we have some service account issues as well. OC get pod, OC system hyphen
Yeah,
CC
because
review.
in that deployment there is no service account
No, it's not
parameter
about
declared.
that. No, it's not about that. I'll let you know. So these are a command to checking those things. Whatever we discuss, yeah, that's a command. OC get pod hyphen O YAML OC ADM policies at SSC reviews hyphen F. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, no worry. I think we missed some component, but we have a command. With the help of this command, we can check that.
Okay.
Okay, I'll let you know. Just a second. I need to perform those lab because it's like a lab-based task. So that's right. But we have option. Then you can check with the help of SSCs, right? So
Okay.
you need to
Yeah.
remember those things. What option we have then? By default, yeah, most of the pod OpenShift create use the restricted SSC, which provide limit access to the resource, right? Similarly, when we're talking about this container and all those things, you can use this particular review command. The any SSC define the run as a user strategy and all those running for the same, right? And then you can just create a service account and then add those service to this particular SCCs, right? The hyphen Z for the SLNX identifies the service account using the Z option and use hyphen N option to service account exist and all, so you can use that, right? So for that, and these are like different options, you guys can use that, right? So let's suppose what I'm going to do here, I'm going to perform this lab for you guys, right? Because these are questions available in the exams. So let me
Mhm.
show that. Okay, so by default we need to log in with the users and all those things, right? So let's suppose I'm just logging with the user. Okay, so we log in with the some users, developer users. Okay, for the testing purposes you guys can create an project and all those things, but these are like optional, right? Again, I'm mentioning as this is not a
Okay.
project based, right? Now what they are mentioning that with the help of this GitLab container images, deploy an application with the name of GitLab by using this image and all those things, right? The process remains same.
Mhm.
What command we have that OC by default we don't have any pod yet, or we don't have any component inside those things. So what command we have, that OC new app hyphen name, and the name what we have, that we can say we have a GitLab. Okay, then we can mention hyphen image, and then we have some custom images. They have some issues and all those things, so we are getting some error messages. In the exam, these things are by default configured. You need to fix those things. Okay, now if you
Okay.
notice, now we have a pod that is in the some error state. It will show that, okay, after some times.
In exam, what we need to fix? Sorry.
I mean, your pod is in error state. Okay, when you check the logs, so they are mentioning we have some permissions issues, right?
Oh,
So you need to
yeah.
create a service account and allow this any UID
Yeah,
SEC,
yeah.
then change inside your deployment. That's all. Good to go.
Got it. Yep, yep.
Yeah. So if you notice now about this pod, so we have this pod that is in error state. Why is running state? Okay, so it's in error state. Clear? Now we want to check this log of this pod. So what we have, that you can verify those OC log GitLab. Okay, so what we have, that these pod require directory inside the etc GitLab over your host machine. So we have insufficient permissions, cannot create directory etc GitLab at this particular due to the permission, all those things. Okay,
Yeah.
so we are getting error messages now. So what point we have, that you can verify this log, and then we are getting these permissions issues and all those things, right?
Yeah.
So again, to creating the SCC and to assigning those SCC, you need a admin privileges. Either maybe if that user have a privilege and all those things, you can perform this command. But again, in the exam, no need to switch with the different user. We have a single user, that user have all permissions.
Okay.
Right, because again, if you wanted to create and all those things, we have some error message. You cannot specify those permissions, you cannot you cannot run this command to perform those permissions and all those things. So that's why we need to log in with my clusters admin users, correct?
Yep.
So OCP Red Hat OCP. Clear? So if you notice now what so again, service account and all those things, this is not a project based, right? So create a service account first. So let's suppose OC create, you can use SA or service account, and service account name could be something like new SA something. Okay, clear?
Yeah.
So here we got, so yeah, so here we have a service account. Now what we need to specify, we need to specify those SCC to these users and all those things, right? So what command we have, that again, OCADM policy, right? Add SCC to user, right? What SCC they need, that NUID -Z for the context and which service account, new SA,
Yes.
right?
Okay, so any UID, that is your
That is your SCC,
SC name. Okay, SCC
SCCs,
name. Yeah. Yeah.
correct,
Got it.
right? So just define those things. Now again, log in with your developer user and switch inside this particular project, right?
And
So
-Z to assign that SCC to
SLN,
that service account.
correct. Right, log in with this these developer user once again. So we log in with the developer user, OC get pod. So we have this pod, okay, that is in the this state. Okay, just a second. This review should be displayed here. I'm not sure about why it's not going to display that, but this should display. Let me check one more time. Describe -o YAML, then OC ADM policies SCC review. Subject review -f. What option we have that? OCDM policies, SCC subject review, hyphen o YAML. No, why is those not working? Is something error? Keyboard is not working. Something. OC describe pod name, and then hyphen o YAML. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so we are in this pod. Actually, we need to get those things. No, that's correct. OC get pod name hyphen o YAML. Yeah, in that format. Then OC ADM policies SCC review hyphen F. No, it's not showing those things. This should show, but in the older versions we have options. If I just show you that, I wanted to verify those with you guys. Hyphen image. This should in error state. Why is running fine? OC new project something demo. OC get pod. OC new app hyphen name. We have some name like hello hyphen image nginx. Okay, so these are my pod. OC get pod name hyphen o YAML pipe OC ADM SCC review policies SCC reviews still we have some permissions issues. Okay, so default they have is restricted as we discussed, and to reviewing those things we have a subject reviews OC get pod hyphen o YAML. Okay, no worry, we'll discuss those things. So clear with that, right? So for now what options we have, that again here we create a service account, right? That have some new SM, right? And also we specify those any YD permissions over there, right? right?
Mhm.
Now what they need that now after that, if you notice now we have a pod, that pod is in which state we can see in the crash, loopback, half state and all those things, right? You can check the log, or you can check the event, or you can describe those things, right? Now what option we have to setting these things in the deployment and all those things? So we have this command. You can do this command like oc set service account and the deployment, and then deployment name, and then your service account. Clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
Either you can use this command in the exam 2 as well. Either simple edit your deployment, the deployment name, okay, and just drop down under the specifications container images sections, I mean here, okay. After the specification, just pass the parameter like what? Service account name. What the name we have? That new SE, that's
New
all.
hyphen S.
Yeah, make sure A is in uppercase and is in uppercase. Either when we run this command, it automatically apply those changes inside this configuration, I mean deployment file. Clear? Save and exit, and within a second, if you notice now your pod is in which state? Running. That's all. So these things you need to perform in your inside your exams,
Okay.
right? So if you notice now, when you describe those SCC, right? OC get pod, OC get pod hyphen pod name hyphen o YAML pipe grep, sorry, not pipe grep, then OC ADM policies SCC review hyphen F hyphen, right? So now we have anybody that is managed by your new essay and all those things. These things are about the essay. Clear?
Yep.
So that is mentioning the same thing. After get pod, and then you can expose, and then wanted to access your application, you can access your applications too as well, right? So in the exam, yeah,
Satyendra, one doubt, like how to identify the deployment name?
with the help of OC get command, okay, OC get deployment, or if not sure, so like these pod are these pod are configured in which deployment, right? Right. So mostly we have a multiple option to identify those things. So mostly what we have that whenever talk about the deployment, so by default whatever the deployment name, that is same as a pod name, GitLab something the IDs, right? Either when you describe those pod, like I'm not sure about that, could be different name, you can change, not a problem. Then you can
Yeah, in
describe.
describe we can review the
Yes,
control by.
yeah. So you can describe those pod, and inside the inside this particular particular, what we can say, the pod describes and all those options. They clearly mention it will manage and maintain by which deployment. So they clearly mention the deployment name and all those things, clearly mention that, right?
Okay.
You can verify. So like multiple methods, the default we have that whatever the deployment name, the same name we are getting from the deployment as a pod name. GitLab something the name, the IDs. Clear?
Yes.
So that's the point, and then you can expose again in the exam. What I mentioned in the exam, your pod is running. It means not that might be produce some messages or produce some output, right? Always expose if that is not exposed, and then create and then access over your browser and make sure that should produce some message. Or in the exam they clearly mention the those some that message should be produced, right? So here what we have that we have a services by default. You guys know that whenever we create a deployment and all those things, it automatically create services for you. Then simple expose, right, service, and then service name, right? Here we got a service name that we can say and now trying to access over something portal that should access.
Okay, so using expose command, you expose that.
Correct.
But in the deployment, if I will expose it using node port, that would also work in exam.
That also work, that those things.
Okay.
That's not a problem. Oh, sorry, we are accessing on especially port number
80.
80. We are accessing on a different port. Just a second. OC delete root. We're not sure about that. GitLab now expose, right? And which port number? Hyphen port number 80.
80.
Specifying some host name as well, because we need some unique name that is mentioned inside this particular DNS. The hyphen host name. and here we got a host oc get root. Now trying to access on this browser, this should produce some message and all like that. So like a private repository. Okay.